The sound of Radio 2. 15 years of fun. Music. Too much.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin.
Hello, I'm Julian. This is my friend Sandy.
It's the Beat Show number 100.
All I want for Christmas is a bottle.
Hello, they've been at the Orange Squash again. Now pull
Dick Button, special agent.
First, I take this big hammer.
Hey, put that hammer down. I'll hold that tin for you.
I thought my mother was a bad cook, but at least her gravy used to move about.
You must remember this.
There was a lot going on in 1967, although to be honest with you, the Summer of Love never really reached higher Tranmere. But we did have the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album, and all we needed was love, or so we were told. As long as we had enough change to get the bus home after the fish and chip shop closed, we didn't care. And in September of 1967, BBC Radio 1 and Radio 2 were launched, replacing a broadcasting institution that had kept us entertained since the end of the war, the BBC Light programme. If you're too young to remember this, you might be surprised at how much you already know. And if you do remember listening to The Light, as the song says, you must remember this.
Journey into space.
Hello,
What's up with Grace?
oh, do come quickly! The stables are on fire!
What?
Be warned, Moriarty. One false move and you die by Bert's method. Take that!
Oh, Ron.
Hello, I'm Paul O'Grady, and welcome to the first of two programmes on BBC Radio 2 looking back at the way we were, the story of the light. I'll be taking you back to a time when wireless meant turning a switch on a well-polished wooden cabinet filled with glowing valves and wires. It used to get so hot, you could cosy up to it just to keep warm. A tuning dial on the front that lit up showing dozens of radio stations from all over Europe. Do you remember them? Hilversum, Paris, Berlin, Luxembourg, and of course our own BBC Radio, including the Home Service, third programme and the Light programme.
Good morning, everyone. This is the BBC Light programme on wavelengths of 1,500 and 261 metres.
Although the BBC Light programme was actually launched in 1945, the BBC provided a similar service during the war, as Nicholas Parsons recalls.
And it was called the BBC Forces Network, which then evolved into the Light programme, that evolved into Radio 2. So it's a process of osmosis, I think that's the word.
It was on the Forces programme that Dame Vera Lynn became the Forces' sweetheart.
You know, I'm thinking of setting up a sort of advice bureau for married couples. Ever since I began singing songs for the marrieds, I've been getting all kinds of letters from people with worries, asking me what I do in their situation. But it all shows that you married ones are very glad to find that there are songs written for you, as well as for the newly in love.
The Forces programme also gave a young singer named Petula Clark her first job on the radio when she was just 9 years old before she went downtown.
Thank you. Now, since my return from holiday, I've been singing to you the songs that steadily remain the most popular. And this week, the top song on the request list is a lovely sentimental number that has over 70 boys writing for it. And here it is.
I did make my radio debut at the age of 9. It seems a bit weird thinking about it. It's almost like talking about somebody else. Yes, and it was a show specially for the forces, and kids could come and send their message to Dad or to Uncle. We're fine, don't worry about us. You know, this was during the Blitz, of course. And I went along to send a message to my uncle. And this was done in the Criterion Theatre, which is still in Piccadilly. And the BBC used to use it because it was pretty well like an air raid shelter. And that's how I started. I sang for the first time on that show. We got a lot of mail back from the troops saying that, you know, it reminded them of home, and I think I sort of represented all the kids who had been left behind in the UK. Of course, Vera Lynn was the Force's sweetheart. I was the Force's little girl.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again we welcome back to the microphone Tommy Handley. Yes, it's that man again.
It's that man again, yes, that man again, yes, the Tommy Handley is here.
Comedy played a big part in taking our minds off our troubles during the war years, and anyone who was around at the time will have fond memories of a show called It's That Man Again, or Itmar as it became known. Denis Norden tells us why it caught on with wartime listeners.
It touched on what we were all experiencing, which were particularly unpleasant things, and had a way of looking at them that was comforting and funny, and therefore it was an enormous influence in drawing people together. It also initiated the catchphrase. It lived to some extent on catchphrases which people exchange in ordinary conversation afterwards. And for a long time, radio comedy was dominated by the search for catchphrases.
Can I do you now, sir?
Go away, Mrs. Mop. Can't you see I'm dressing? Come back when I'm covered.
Can't I darn your dickie, sir?
Chip! It doesn't want darning. That's a spider's web on it.
After the war, on the 29th of July 1945, the Forces programme became the BBC Light programme.
It's very typical of the BBC to call it the Light programme, because you must remember at that time we were living in a blackout world. So the light had a kind of little added significance it didn't have today. And it was much in use as you had light comedians, light music, light refreshments.
The city will sit up when the lights go up in London. We'll all be lit up as the Strand was, only more, much more. And before the party's played out, they will fetch the fire brigade out to the littest, uppest scene you ever saw.
The Light programme continued to brighten up the dark days of post-war Britain with many of the shows that had run through the war years. Music While You Work and Workers' Playtime kept them singing along in the factories, as Dame Esther Rantzen remembers.
Da 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 da.
Music While You Work will be played to you by A.J. Pearl and his banjo octet.
Da 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 bram bram bram.
Quite a lot of psychologists and people went to work on the programme, the idea being that I believe it was after lunch. It was always scheduled for when workers in factories, when their energy was at its lowest ebb and their motivation the slowest, this music would gradually speed up its tempo so that the workers in the factories would also speed up their manufacturing or output or whatever it was.
Music While You Work remained on the Light programme until 1967.
I think it was very carefully designed so that people wouldn't bang things on the conveyor belt in time. Deep in the heart of Texas would be no good at all, because you'd be going, the sun shines bright in the middle of the night, whatever it is. Deep in the heart of Texas, ba 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 ba. You can't actually have something that goes ba 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 in the middle of a tune. So I can remember it being explained to me, something that would be brisk and uplifting but not too rhythmic, so people didn't dance the conga or hit things in time to it.
Workers' Playtime had a good run on the radio from 1941 until 1964.
It's one of those programmes that I used to listen to because there was nothing else to listen to, but it wasn't one of my favourite programmes.
Tony Blackburn.
They used to go in the lunch hour to a factory or something like that and interview people about their work and then play some music. And then they used to have, as I remember it, they used to have some personalities there. It was basically a roadshow.
So you'd have a singer, a musician, a comedian, a speciality act. It was a mini variety show.
Hello, Daisy. Hello, Gert. How are you? All right, yes. Here, you know I said I wanted to move into a more expensive flat? Well, I shan't have to now. Won't you? Why? The landlord's put the rent up. Oh, good. Yes, lovely. How are you getting on in your munition factory? All right. But I get a bit tired, you know, making shells 6 days out of 7. Good job you're not a chicken, then. They make shells every day. Here, which department are you in? Oh, I don't think I ought to tell you. All right, don't bother, I know. You're in the powder section. That's right. Who told you? Well, you did just now. Of course, you know, there are two kinds of powder, Gert. The powder that women use and this powder that the men use. So don't forget, one goes off with a bang and the other goes on with a puff. Oh, dear.
This is the American Forces Network.
How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? This is Bob London Hope telling you to watch that shoe rationing and we'll soon get rid of that heel Hitler.
Practically everybody who was writing comedy for radio in those days had been a member of the forces.
Denis Norden again.
And in the forces, wherever we were listening to the American Forces Network, AFN, which introduced us to these people we'd never heard before on regular series. Now, it had an enormous effect on people, even if unconsciously there was an informality about their attitude to what they were doing, a sort of radicalism which had not been present there before the war and before our exposure to AFN.
Tell me, is this the subterranean entrance to the home of that villainous gopher?
Yes, better known as the Hole of the Mole.
Mole, I've come here to ask you a question.
I don't know where to get cigarettes either.
Now, you can't wiggle out of this one, Mole.
But I'm telling you, it had nothing to do with Snowflake's disappearance.
Aha, I said nothing about Snowflake's disappearance. How did you know she was missing?
I seen it in the newsreel.
It hasn't been in the newsreel.
I read it in the papers.
It hasn't been in the papers.
I heard it on the radio.
It hasn't been on the radio.
I wish they'd hurry up with that television.
During the war, it was the BBC Forces programme. And some of the great comedy shows arose out of that.
Nicholas Parsons again.
I mean, they decided that there should be one programme emphasising devoted to the RAF, and that was Much Binding in the Marsh, where you have two people who were in the RAF. And then you had the one concerned with the Navy, which was Waterlogged Spar, which was written and hosted by Eric Barker, his wife Pearl Hackney and John Pertwee and others.
The Waterlogged Spar.
And then you had the one devoted to the Army, which was presented by Charlie Chester, called Stand Easy. And so you had these different programmes with the emphasis on those three major services. And those carried on after the war, and they were very successful.
And much binding in the marsh. The price of vegetables is quite appalling.
Much binding in the marsh. Much binding in the marsh.
Very nice, Esther, yeah. But don't give up the day job. Anyway, there was a change of mood all over Britain after the war.
There was national sense of relief. In other words, every one of our listeners was sharing the same mood.
Denis Norden with his writing partner Frank Muir were responsible for one of the most successful radio comedy shows of the post-war years. Take it from here.
Take it from here. Don't go away when you can take it from here. Why don't you stay and maybe join in the fun? Now the show has begun.
Yes, Dick Bentley and Jimmy Edwards will be on hand for the next 30 minutes with Wallace Eaton, Alma Cogan, June Whitfield, Herbert Mostyn in the keynotes, all inviting you to...
Take it from here.
Radio 2's Ken Bruce takes it from here.
It was a classic example of the BBC giving a show long enough to develop. It started in, I think, 1948, but really still by 1950-51, it was, it was a popular show, but it hadn't quite found its feet. And it was only when they started the Glums, which I think was about 1953, that absolutely everything fell into place. But the writing was what marked out Take It From Here. Frank Muir and Denis Norden wrote for intelligent people. They wrote jokes that may not be understood. They certainly didn't write down to the lowest common denominator. They assumed a certain intelligence and wit and knowledge amongst their audience. And of course, the audience had that. They had the intent. And if they didn't catch every reference, they caught enough to make them think that this is really funny. And if you listen to Take It From Here today, it stands up very well.
Thanks, Doc. Let me mention here that Doc will be accompanied on the Novocaine by his lovely anaesthetist, Shirley Abattoir. Known to you all as the Ether Guy.
Hello, this is Shirley speaking, and tonight is my gas night. I do want to thank you all for the lovely letters you sent me after I appeared on the National Health Services show.
Thank you. Scalpel.
Scalpel.
Clamp.
Clamp.
Music.
Music.
Tonsillectomy, I like to do tonsillectomy on folks like you. Tonsillectomy, I'll tell you this, I don't know what it's all about, but just the same I'll yank it out.
Astonishingly, of course, there wasn't Twitter or anything those days, but you had a lot of letters and people, girls particularly, who wrote to us. It was wonderful because their fiancé was just like Ron Glum, which in our eyes was equivalent to an insult. But so in a way, it was taken to people's hearts in a manner that we'd never intended at the beginning.
Oh, Ron! When the girls in my office told me, I thought they were having me on. After all, the sort of girls we've got in our office, well, one's got to be careful.
Which one's that?
Pete Murray, later a star on The Light and Radio 2, recalls how Take It From Here made a star of June Whitfield.
Take It From Here actually started June Whitfield on a very successful broadcasting career. She'd been quite a big musical star on the stage. And suddenly she became a big name on radio. Because radio was as big then as television is now. In fact, it was bigger.
Jimmy Edwards was the father, Pa Glum. Ron was his very dim son, and that was Dick Bentley. And Alma was actually Mrs. Glum, and the characters of Ron and Eth, who were permanently engaged, sort of cottoned on with the public. It eventually became about half of the show because their writing was so funny. They'd do things like, oh, Ron, when are we going to get married? It's not right that two such hot-blooded people as us should be permanently engaged. Oh, beloved, you'll never know how much I yearn. I do, Eth, and it's not enough for both of us to live on. They were so good with words.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're educating Archie.
I have no doubt that the Light programme gave us some of the best radio comedy of all time. But who was it who came up with the bright idea of having a ventriloquist on the radio? Don't knock it though, because Peter Bruff's Archie Andrews became very popular. The show had 15 million listeners in the 1950s, and the children loved Archie. You could buy Archie Andrews lollipops and soap, and maybe Radio 2's Ken Bruce should consider giving away prizes like that on Popmaster. I think it'd probably go down well, that can.
Educating Archie with Peter Bruff, the worst ventriloquist ever, but worked on radio. His programme, Educating Archie, was huge, absolutely huge. And that started on The Light and got some plays out on the Home Service as well. Tremendous writers. Eric Sykes wrote for that right through it, and terrific actors. And it was a terrific starting ground for many comics.
Andrews, where's my desk?
Your desk, sir? Aren't you at it?
You're doing your best to get me at it, aren't you? And for the last time, where's my desk?
Oh, well, if that's the last time, let's talk about something else, shall we?
Among the up-and-coming stars appearing on the show were Tony Hancock, Benny Hill, Julie Andrews and Petula Clark.
I do remember being on that, and I always thought it was a bit peculiar, because how strange to have a ventriloquist on the radio. Because the whole thing about ventriloquist is about vision. I thought it was a bit odd.
Oh, Archie, there's our music.
Yes, Mr. Bygrave.
Here, Archie, being as you are, you must get very lonely.
Yes, I do, Mr. B.
I think what you need is a girlfriend.
Max Bygraves went so far as to make a record with him.
Here's one. I'll take the legs from some old table. I'll take the arms from some old chair.
What?
I'll take the neck from some old bottle. And from the horse, I'll take the hair.
Paul Hollingdale went on to see what Peter Brough and his wooden friend Archie Andrews could do on stage in front of an audience that could actually see him.
I actually saw him at the Hippodrome in Brighton here. He was a dreadful ventriloquist. His lips were going up and down like there was no tomorrow, but nobody cared. They liked the idea of it. But he got away with murder.
My name's Barry Cryer, Brad Pitt lookalike, and I've been doing radio for some considerable years. Beryl Reid was in the shows, and allegedly Peter Brough said to her one day, "Beryl, can you see my lips moving?" And she said, "Only when Archie's talking."
Ladies and gentlemen, we present Welsh Rabbit.
The Light programme could count on all the different BBC outposts across the country to find the newest talent. In 1949, a comedy show from Wales was given a national slot on the Light programme. The BBC claimed it had more listeners in Wales than Itmar. BBC Radio Wales Owen Money.
One of the very, very early comedy programmes was Welsh Rabbit, which was a network programme made in Wales. Gladys Morgan, Wyn Calvin and people like that who were very famous in Wales. And they were on the network, and we haven't had anything on the network comedy-wise and until Gavin and Stacey.
All over the country these days, artists are busily at rehearsal for pantomime. Tonight we welcome some of them to Welsh Rabbit. And first of all, then, here's ugly sister Gladys Morgan. Oh, well.
Well, it's very nice to be here anyway. It's very cold, isn't it? Yes, it's cold enough for a hairnet, isn't it? Yes. Well, I'm glad you like my little blazer. You like it? Yes, I bought this to go to Blackpool this summer. Yes, you know, on my holidays. I generally go to Porthcawl, but I thought I'd have a change this time, you know. Yes. We had some lovely apartments in Blackpool. Oh, I shall never forget them. 3 minutes from the sea if you had a flying saucer. Yeah.
Petula Clark was a guest on the show and remembers an occasion when she had to sing in Welsh. She learned the language while staying with her grandparents in Wales during the war.
Oh, no, you're not going to ask me to speak some Welsh. No. Afraid my Welsh is pretty well gone. Although many years later, I did a show for the BBC with Yvonne Littlewood, and we did a whole segment from Wales, and Yvonne had the idea of me to sing with the Welsh choir, you know, the male choir. And I thought, I hope they're not going to ask me to sing in Welsh, you know. And they did, of course. And I thought, here we go. And the funny thing is, it came back. You know, I read it, went through it a couple of times, and it was there. So the Welsh is still somewhere in there, but it's probably been shoved out by the French.
As I'm in the mood to sing to you, I shall now sing you. I'm amazed that I still remember this. The title music for a comedy programme starring Ted Ray.
Dame Esther Rantzen again.
And it's clearly imprinted on some strange wrinkle in my brain, and I cannot get it out of it. But it went, raise a laugh, when you're feeling sad and blue, then raise a laugh, and soon that smile will conquer a frown. The smile will spread all over the town.
Don't give in, try and grin. Don't be like a passport photograph. Come on and meet Ted Ray, he'll chase your
troubles away. 'Cause raise a laugh. And it was a situation comedy. There were lots of them, and he was very funny.
Ted Ray had a long-running show with Raise a Laugh, a regular listen on Friday nights from 1949 until 1961.
Mind you, the customs people are very strict. I remember when I was coming back, the customs fellow called out, "Please state everything you bought whilst you were in Ireland." One girl said,
I only bought a set of false eyelashes. So he looked down at his list and he said, £1 to pay, miss. Sorry. Another girl said, I bought some false fingernails. So he looked at the list again and said, 2 and 6 to pay, miss, 2 and 6, sorry. The third girl went up with a huge travelling case and she whispered something to him and he let her go by. So I said to this fellow, I said, what's the... Now, just a moment, please. I said, what's the idea? One girl pays £1 for false eyelashes, another one pays half a crown for false nails. This one goes by with a portmanteau and pays nothing. He said, well, she told me she got a trunk with a false bottom and there's nothing on my list about that.
I adored Ted Ray. I thought he was really, really talented and very, very nice. I really enjoyed working with him.
Dame June Whitfield also enjoyed working with Ted Ray.
Yes, I did one series, I think, with Ted Ray. Great fun. And he was marvellous, funny man, and a very, ready with a joke for anything. Had that sort of mind that, rather like Eric Morecambe, have a funny answer to anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to have a go.
Wilfred Pickles was an announcer in the North Region, reading the local news and announcements, and he decided that he'd come off that and go all sort of Yorkshire.
Paul Hollingdale again.
And the show was called Have a Go, and his wife Mabel was at the table dishing out these prizes, which you wouldn't even take today, half a crown and all this sort of thing. And at the piano was Violet Carson, later to become Ina Sharples. She was doing all sorts of odd jobs in Manchester to keep on the air, you know. She was a singer, she was a pianist, and she used to play all the cadenzas on this thing. Well, Wilfred Pickles was very clever, so he said, I'm going to do it in a Yorkshire accent. That's where I am. How do? How are you? Are you courting? You know, and all this sort of thing. And the show was mesmerising. It had a big audience because people could relate to it.
Was your husband always a shepherd?
Yes, right from 9 years old.
Where did you spend your honeymoon?
Oh, where did I have my honeymoon?
Yeah?
Oh, in the Lamb and Pen.
Wilfred Pickles got out and about a lot. Give 'em the money, Mabel. Are you courting? Extraordinary programme that was, but I suppose when I went out in the streets talking to strangers about their personal lives, I was inheriting a bit from Wilfred Pickles and the Light programme.
Because, we talk about the X Factor these days, when they have a go and things like that, was the forerunners to all these talent shows that are out these days. And Wilfred Pickles and his wife Mabel, they were part and parcel of that. And I used to listen to them and get great enjoyment from it.
And let's not forget the kiddies. Oh no, there was plenty for children to listen to on the Light programme. Johnny Walker, Esther Rantzen and Angela Rippon.
Listen with Mother. It's 1:45 and time for Listen with Mother.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin.
All terribly posh back then, the BBC. And they'd read a story. But, of course, about 10 to 2, I had to make my way back to school for 2 o'clock. So that's one of my early memories of the Light programme.
Now, I always longed to have a request played on children's favourites. I think I wrote into them. And great songs like Nellie the Elephant, Packed Her Trunk, and Trundled Off to the Jungle. I may have sung that to my grandson to his bewilderment. But I wonder, do they do special songs for children to sing and enjoy these days?
To Bombay, a travelling circus came. They brought an intelligent elephant, and Nellie was her name. One dog.
Saturday mornings, that was children's requests. And my goodness, the music choice was so different then. I can remember things like I'm a Troll being one of the records that children would request.
Johnny Beerling, who later became controller of Radio 1, worked as a studio manager on Children's Hour.
There was a man called Derek McCulloch, who was known as Uncle Mac. Now, he'd been around since before the war and had been severely wounded in the war and was rather a curmudgeonly old man, but he used to present children's favourites on Saturday and Sunday mornings. A few pop records, but mostly Nellie the Elephant and Sparky's Magic Piano and things like that.
Sparky was a little boy just about your age, maybe a little older by now. He had been taking piano lessons for almost a whole year.
I'm Paul O'Grady, and you're listening to part 1 of The Story of the Light on BBC Radio 2.
I say that the Light programme, its golden years were the 50s, as it evolved because they introduced so many programmes, like Take It From Here and all that sort of thing.
Paul Hollingdale.
Dick Barton, Special Agent.
Oh, yes. We used to run home from school to listen to Dick Barton. I loved it.
Dick Barton, Special Agent, starring Noel Johnson, who'd come out of the BBC Repertory Company. It was created by Edward J. Mason, an entrepreneurial character, and it was delivered in frenetic style, very fast-moving, with a tune which was called Devil's Gallop, composed by Charles Williams, that got everybody tuned in at 6:45 in the evenings.
Look, I swear the men in that lodge are Barton and his friends. Barton? It is not possible. But look for yourself. Out of the lodge. How in Himmel did they know the coastal queen was to be suspected? How is this witchcraft? You mentioned Saint Nazaire in reverse to the man white. Barton must have put 2 and 2 together.
I mean, you were hanging on to every episode to see what Dick Barton would get up to with his friends. And Noel Johnson, who played Dick Barton, was totally mesmerised. He couldn't believe that he was just a jobbing actor, had suddenly gone into star status.
Journey into space. The BBC presents Jet Morgan in Operation Luna.
Journey into Space by Charles Chilton blasted off from the Light programme in 1953. Captain Jet Morgan explored the moon 16 years before the actual moon landing. Tony Blackburn and Owen Money from Radio Wales were big fans.
I used to come back from school, put my transistor radio on, and I used to always put it on 5 minutes before because the valves had to warm up. And listening to it was tremendous, and it was beautifully produced.
I must have been about 5 or 6 or 7 years of age. We'd all look forward to it. All the boys in school said, don't forget Journey into Space is on today. We'd all gather around the radio and have a listen to Lenny. And the music, they only ever played 2 notes. Used to go, da-da-da-da-da-da. And you'd be frightened to death.
Journey into Space kept David Jacobs busy. He not only did the opening announcements, but he ended up playing over 20 minor parts.
After spending 1 lunar day on the moon, Jet Morgan and his crew prepared to make their long journey back to Earth. But when the time came to take off, nothing in the ship would function. All efforts to find the reason for the ship's failure were fruitless, and the 4 men spent the lunar night, equivalent to 14 Earth days, within the ship, waiting and hoping.
But the longest-running broadcast serial in the world actually began on the Light programme in 1951, and it's still going strong today over on Radio 4. The Archers was as popular then as Coronation Street and EastEnders is now.
I remember listening to the Archers that week when ITV started and Grace Archer was killed in the fire. And I remember all the old characters, Dan Archer, of course, who would still have been alive then. And the way that, and I still love listening to the Archers on Radio 4, but that, again, that love of drama and the spoken word started with the Light programme.
Everybody, help!
Hello, what's up with Grace?
Oh, do come quickly! The stables are on fire!
The what?
What heavens, Grace? The whole loft's ablaze! Come on, quickly! Help me with the hose!
Look, Grace, what's going on? Look, what's all the commotion? Fire, Reggie. The stables are going up. Now ring for the fire brigade straight away, will you? Right away.
The 1950s was a golden age for radio comedy. Ken Bruce.
So many great comedy stars who'd come up in wartime were getting their outing on things like Variety Bandbox, which was another great place to start, and Workers' Playtime. Many established comics appeared on that, but also some young turns starting out, people like Roy Hudd.
And they had very strict rules because there was a sort of green book they had of all the words they could use.
I had a joke I told in one of them when I said, and then she stood there and she was absolutely naked, and that was the gag. And the producer said to me, Nicholas, joke, we can't use the word naked. And naked was one of the taboo words. And so he said, can you not say she stood there with no clothes on? And I said, it wouldn't make the joke very funny, really. You want a concise word. So I said, she stood there starkers, how's that? Oh, great, that's fine.
Tony Hancock was one of those rising stars heard regularly on the Light programme. Repeats of Hancock's Half Hour on Radio 4 Extra still get big audiences today.
Hancock's Half Hour. He was a character, he really was. Very lugubrious. I mean, he drew on the melancholy in his personality to create that character, the fellow from East Cheam, Railway Cuttings, East Cheam. And brilliant timing. I mean, he was a man who could get time a straight line and make people laugh with it.
I wonder what's on the headphones. A woman's hour. How madly interesting. Miss Griselda Plunkett is going to tell us how to fillet haddocks. Oh, yes, I'd better listen to this. This'll come in handy, this will. Nothing I want to do more than lie in bed with me leg up, filleting haddock.
The writing partnership of Alan Simpson and Ray Galton played a big part in the success of Hancock's Half Hour.
We took what we had of Hancock and built on it and gave him new ideas, gave him new points of view and all that, really. None of it is real as such. Just gradually built it up.
When we first started writing for Tony, the persona he was using was totally different to the one we remember from Hancock's Half Hour. It was still educating Archie, the schoolmaster. It was all a bit, oh my word, oh little wooden boy. It was a very sort of, almost based a bit on Will Hay in terms of the seediness of the character. And what we gradually did was change, make him more like himself. So, we wrote himself in his own image, really. He wasn't like the character that we developed, but he sounded like him. If you met him in the street, you said, oh, it's Tony Hancock. If you heard him, you'd say it's Tony Hancock, but he was much more intelligent than the character. I mean, he was a buffoon the way we wrote him, but he wasn't like that at all.
By 1955, Hancock's Half Hour was a favourite of millions of listeners, along with co-stars Sid James, Bill Kerr and Kenneth Williams.
Kenneth then was a serious actor. And in fact, he didn't really want the job. He resisted it for a time. But he was such a good character actor that when he played a character role, the voice he assumed became very funny. And he created some on Hancock's Half Hour, which was so successful and so funny that Hancock, in the end, decided he must go. To me, one of the funniest sketches ever was the one with the Hancock's playing the test pilot. And this fellow climbs into the cabin because he's been repairing it on the top. And he says, no, it's not messing about, And he goes on like that. And it's a wonderful comedy sketch.
Hancock to control tower. Something strange is happening. There's a peculiar knocking sound on the windscreen. Seems to be coming from outside the plane. I'm slowing down to 1,800 miles an hour. We'll slide cockpit open to see what's wrong.
Good evening. There's an half cold out here. Can I come in?
What's that?
I say an half cold out here. Can I come in?
There's no room. Get off.
Oh, don't be like that. Move over. I'll sit on your lap.
This is the BBC Light programme, and here is a photograph of me saying.
Well, here it is.
The Goon Show!
The Goon Show went out on both the Home Service and the Light programme.
And it was an absolute sea change in radio because it was men who'd been in the Second World War, Peter Sellers, Harry Seacombe, Spike Milligan, Michael Benteen. So they had a built-in disrespect for authority. You insult all authority, including the BBC. And it was an anarchic show.
So that really made an impact on me, listening to that. The Goon Show was our Monty Python.
Enter a human being. My name is Ned Seagoon. Curse.
Dame Esther Rantzen remembers going to watch them record the shows, and it sounds like they had as much fun making it as we did listening to it.
When I was about 14, a friend of mine was as addicted to the Goons as I was, and she used somehow to get tickets, I think just by writing in over and over again. And we used to go and watch the recording, which happened in Camden Town. And there you were belonging to a really interesting club. Obviously Spike Milligan, Peter Sellers, the greats. And Peter Sellers was by then already a very popular film star, so he used to arrive in a Rolls Royce, and Spike Milligan, who was just a genius, used to arrive on his bike, which is all he could afford. And it was just wonderful, the voices, the characters that they created. And there would always be some sort of private joke. You would watch the members of the orchestra passing a plastic spoon to each other when they should have been concentrating on the script and their next cue. It was huge fun.
Chapter 2. How I Captured a British Idiot in Drawers.
Come on, you. Spotty Hubbard.
Take a hand of me. Do you think you can take Rippon alive? Fixes Moriarty with hypnotic gaze. My man, I was trained in judo by the great Burt, using the body as a counter pivot to displace the opponent. I used the great Burt's method of throwing the opponent to his death. Be warned, Moriarty. One false move and you die by Burt's method. Take that! Where did I see that twit Burt?
You hit my friend Bottle again and see what happens. See, that's what happens.
Look at him, can't you tell that he's a boy in love?
The Light programme was known for its wonderful orchestras, bands and shows with exotic names like Gala Night at the Rainbow Room, where a young Petula Clark sang.
Yes! Oh, how wonderful of you to mention that. I'd totally forgotten. It was great. It was great fun. I think Benny Lee was on it. There were some wonderful people working on those shows, and there was a certain mood about it which was quite wonderful. And all those theatres, of course, where we were working in London. There was the Aeolian Hall and the Paris Theatre, which was, I think, where the Goon Show used to be done.
Another music show Petula Clark recalls is Cabin in the Cotton, with songs from America's Deep South.
I absolutely loved it, and we used to do that at the Aeolian Hall. Edric Connor, it was really just him and me, and he was so adorable. But he was very emotional when he sang, and we used to sing duets, and when he sang his solos, he used to insist that I would be there, and he used to put his arms around me, and he was huge, and he squeezed me very tight. But it was a wonderful experience. I loved it. That was with Charles Chilton, I think, who was producing it, who was absolutely brilliant.
Good night, little children. That's what Uncle Remus said. Good night, little children, Uncle Remus said.
Well, Uncle Remus, don't look like your rheumatics is troubling you much today.
Why, hello there, Mr. John. How you come on?
Why, Daddy, I didn't see you come.
Have you come to take this little gal away from us, Mr. John?
I'm afraid so, Uncle Remus. We've got a steamboat to catch.
Then I expects the time done come for us to say goodbye, honey.
Oh, no, Uncle Remus. I don't want to say goodbye.
No, honey. Now, you say your goodbyes to Benny.
Goodbye, Benny.
Goodbye, Miss Petula. Don't forget us now.
No, Benny, I won't.
Friday night is music night.
Friday Night is Music Night began in 1953, so very much a light programme.
Ken Bruce again.
The BBC Concert Orchestra was fairly newly formed, only been formed a year, and this was to be their signature programme.
Sydney Torch, the BBC Concert Orchestra, leader Arthur Levins, our star singers Valerie Masterson, John Mitchinson and Leslie Feisen. The Friday Nights, directed by John McCarthy, and William Davis at the piano, all for your pleasure in our weekly series of music for everybody.
It was expected to run for only a few weeks, and here it is still running in 2017, and the orchestra is as strong as ever. Things have changed. That's the great thing. If you get a good idea, you don't sit still with it. You don't let it just fester and die. You develop it, you progress it, you give it some new elements, and you try and keep some elements very much the same. But it's still recognisably the same programme, and that's the key to it, I think. Just take the original idea and just change it slightly and let it live.
Sing something simple as cares go by.
And who can forget joining in with Sing Something Simple on Sundays? I'll be honest with you, I hated it. Because as soon as I heard those singers, I knew it was time to get ready for school, see if my uniform was clean, see if I had my sports kit, and see if I'd had my homework done, which I didn't. I know it was a hugely popular programme, for me, Sing Something Simple spelt nothing but misery. Anyway, this horror started on the Light in 1959 and continued on Radio 2 until 2001.
I used to love Sing Something Simple. I used to always try and guess the first song. Welcome to Sing Something Simple with the Adams Singers, directed by Cliff Adams, and the song used to go ba 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 ba.
I'd love to get you on a slow boat to China. All to myself alone.
Sing Something Simple is an astonishing programme because it ran from the mid-50s, I think, and didn't change its format. Cliff Adams had his singers, many of whom had been there since the beginning, and one or two are still with us, I'm pleased to say. But he started this idea of just rearranging every popular song and some old songs for his singers, mostly male, but always one female in the mix just to provide a top end to the harmonies. And you would think it wouldn't have lasted. And I can remember hearing people say in 1960, oh God, Sing Something Simple, how boring is that? And then in later years, people were listening to it. The audience figure stayed up, and they couldn't possibly have been the same people who were listening in 1956, who are now still listening in 1993. It developed its own audience, which got used to it and came along. But I can remember listening to Pick of the Pops, and then at the end of that, when you hear da-da-da-da-da, you thought, oh my, we'd switch off, those of us who are young. But the older audience, well...
Sing something simple, just you and I.
This has been the 100th broadcast of Sing Something Simple, a collection of favourite songs sung by the Adams Singers, directed by Cliff Adams and accompanied by Jack Emblow. Sing Something Simple is produced by John Brow.
We'll sing something simple for you, something for you.
Sundays on the Light programme bring back special memories of being at home surrounded by family with the wireless on.
Sunday lunchtime will always for me be associated with the radio, and of course it would have been the Light programme.
Angela Rippon again.
So I suppose you could say that my favourite programmes like Round the Horn or Beyond I Ken and The Navy Lark and Billy Cotton's Band Show, every time I think of any of those programmes I associate it with the smell of boiling cabbage. My mother was not the best cook in the world, and when she cooked cabbage she boiled the life out of it, like I think an awful lot of families did in the 50s and early 60s. And so we would sit down for Sunday lunch and it would be Billy Cotton's Band Show. Wakey, wakey would start off with that music. Da, 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 da.
Wakey, wake!
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Billy Cotton introducing another Billy Cotton Band Show.
And we commence with a number called Leap a Leap. Come on, hurry up. Blimey, I allow you half an hour round the pub, but that's not long enough for some of
But
you.
I'm
Now,
no-
don't waste time. Sit down there and let's get started.
But don't you
You're
see
not here to argue with me. You're here to play your musical saw.
In the valleys of Wales, dinner is cooked every Sunday morning, and you can smell it coming from every house. And the Billy Cotton Band show just went along with the smell of the dinner, really. I'd be going over the garden wall next door to pinch the mint from the woman next door and get back over to chop the mint up, and Billy Cotton's band show would be on, and it was great.
Anyway, this is Billy Cotton saying cheerio for everyone. And don't forget, wake you...
One particular programme on Sunday lunchtimes brought families closer together, especially those stationed abroad in the armed forces. Judith Chalmers was one of the many presenters of two-way family favourites. Na-na-na, na-na-na, na-na-na. Get the spuds on, mother.
Hello everyone. Well, there's not very much I can say about the weather in London today. It's pretty nondescript. It's warm, but no sunshine as yet. Still,
I cannot believe that's my voice, but there it is. And I must say I was thrilled to be asked to do it because, of course, the programme had such a great reputation with Cliff Mitchellmore and Jean Metcalfe particularly. It was the sort of programme that people set their lunch times by on a Sunday. It was a great family listening time, wasn't it?
In Rosemary Darling of the Royal Air Force at Larbrook. That's Why I'm Crying was her choice for her fiancé, James MacLeod of 10 Prior Road, Tweedmouth, in Berwick-on-Tweed. To you, Jim, she sends all her love and affection.
Johnny Walker and David Hamilton remember it well.
Sunday lunchtime, all the family's there, 5 children. Mum and Dad making the Sunday lunch. Dad stirring the gravy, and that wonderful theme tune of two-way family favourites. Fabulous. You should put it in here.
Well, there were no other record shows. That was a link-up between London and Cologne and sometimes other outposts where British forces were as well. It was called the only radio show that had its own smell, because when you heard the theme on a Sunday afternoon, da-da-da-da-da-da, you could smell the roast beef and Yorkshire pudding that was being cooked in millions of homes all over the country.
They certainly can. Well, instead of catching Ian's cold, let's turn now to catching bouquets. I don't know if there was a lucky bridesmaid to catch Rita's yesterday.
Another regular presenter on two-way family favourites was the late Paul Hollingdale, speaking here in his last interview before he died.
12 million tuned into two-way family favourites. And the reason? There was nothing else on the air. Luxembourg broadcast during the day. The Pirates hadn't started at that time. There was no television. Probably the most iconic record that was ever played on two-way family favourites was Pat Boone, I'll Be Home. The lyrics contained everything that the servicemen were thinking about with their families and relations at home.
I'll be home, my darling. Please wait for me. Wait for me. We'll stroll along together. Once more our love will be free.
Well, that was a massive programme which had started out in wartime with Jean Metcalfe in London and Cliff Mitchellmore in Cologne, and eventually they blossomed and married and remained married for many, many years. It was a true radio romance. But that programme ran way into, well, until the end of the late programme, and then beyond into Radio 2, well into the 70s. In those days, it was perhaps the only chance people would get to hear their loved ones in the course of a whole year.
Judith Chalmers remembers one really happy moment when they could pass on some good family news over the airwaves.
a couple was stationed in Germany, and they'd been trying to get hold of their parents to tell them that that morning they'd had a baby. And it was their first grandchild, and they couldn't get through to them on the line from where they were in Germany. And so they got onto BFBS, the British Forces Broadcasting Service, and said, can you get this message across on the air? We've had a lovely little girl today. We managed to sort of send that message out, and then the grandparents rang us and said, what a marvellous message to get. It was that sort of atmosphere that had been created on that programme, wasn't it?
Well, folks, we've reached halfway in our look back at the way we were. Next time, as the story of the light continues on BBC Radio 2, the BBC goes round the horn as rambling Sid Rumpo sings about how green is Nadja's grew.
By all means, be my guest.
Oh, no, I was merely being picturesque, as is my wont.
Oh, weren't you?
No, I'm trying to give it up.
And there's trouble at sea as pirate Johnny Walker sets his sights on Mrs. Dale and her diary.
The entire cast of Mrs. Dale's diary had committed an offence under Marine Offences Act and were liable for 2 years in jail.
Well, I can't wait, really, to tell you the truth. This is getting like a proper soap opera. So from me, Paul O'Grady, ta-ra till next time. You've been listening to part 1 of The Story of the Light with me, Paul O'Grady. It was produced by Derek Webster and Ashley Byrne and was a Made in Manchester production for BBC Radio 2. We're dedicating The Story of the Light to the late Brian Matthew and Paul Hollingdale. Both of these great and much-loved presenters made an unforgettable contribution to broadcasting in Britain.